This is Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society of BC, brought to you by Sitka Gear. Come along as we bring conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Yeti. Thank you Sitka Gear and Yeti for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems.
Yeah, so Sheep Week, it was awesome running India.
Yeah, it was good. It was so good to run into you too. And like I was saying, the thing that I find so interesting about Sheep Week, whether it's the one that they put on in Reno or the local one here in Idaho, is just how much of a almost cult-like following that you have of hunters, and a vast majority of which have never hunted that species. And it's and I mean this in a good way, it's just a very interesting and cool dichotomy, because it's got a different feel to it than any other expo or show season thing that you'll go to, and it's very cool. It's very cool to go to all those.
Well, that's the favorite part for me, and it's a weird world that we live in now, because we're all connected by technology, right? Like you and I, we've talked several times virtually, but I've never seen you in person, but like you run into each other and it's like, you just pick up where you left off. And it's like that with now, like it's multiplied, it's hundreds of people. And it's almost like my sort of frustration is like, we want more time. And it's like, you got like 3 days to connect with people, like hundreds of people that you only see once a year. Right. So it's,
yeah, I mean, I ran into you in the hallway and I was like, almost starstruck. I was like, that's the guy I see on video. And then I was doing one of the, of course we did, Mountain Tough did Tough Sheep there. And I was in one of the rooms kind of not necessarily judging, just making sure everything went smooth at that station. And I saw someone that looked like Julie, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to look awkward. And she's like, "Hey, Kyle," and I was like, "I knew it. That was her." So you got to meet Julie, which was great, and she crushed that workout. But I agree, just the camaraderie and the ability to get a network and meet so many people is just a really fun time. It's an awesome week.
Well, and Tough Sheep's changed the look of Sheep Week too, right? Like that challenge, and like, I don't know, man. Like for me, I walk into that room and you hear Randy Newberg's voice, and you see all these people. They're not dressed with cowboy hats and their boots and like going to they got their gear on, and it's like men, women, children of all ages too. Like that's the unifying factor. I've heard this lots. Matt Ward, one of our volunteers, he talks about people that sweat together. Like there's this camaraderie, this bond. Like that's why the CrossFit community is a bit bonkers, right? There's just that connection through sweat, right? And I kind of see that at Sheep Week, and I think it's super cool to see.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, and you were right. There were, the youngest one guy was 83 and finished it, and he finished it in its entirety. He did not want any help at all, and like I just thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it's such a cool concept that Mountain Tough and the team has come up with. You guys have designed, and just I think it's just like, it's fun to have these new things and these fun things, and then, man, like giving away a sheep hunt on top of it. It's like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then I'm not sure how much of the backstory you got on the guy that won, but one guy had won it. He'd already had a sheep hunt booked for this year, and was going to then go back and book one 4 years later, for eligibility reasons. Kind of did that, and then came back to us the following day, and he said, "Man, I just don't feel right about it. I would rather give someone else the opportunity who wouldn't get to hunt sheep an opportunity to hunt sheep." So he basically gave it back, and they pulled another name out of the cooler, and someone else will be hunting sheep, this year. So the whole thing just embodies the sheep community, and even the guide who won Guide of the Year, he stood up and gave his acceptance speech, and that whole speech was about lessons he had learned from other hunters and other guides as he was guiding through the years. It was nothing about just a teamwork and camaraderie. Like it's a really cool place, really cool and unique place.
Yeah, 100%. I often talk about it as our wild sheep family or our community, conservation community, and it's a very tight knit. Before we kind of went live, we started vibing on a bunch of stuff. I'm like, Kyle, we got to record this, man. Like, there's this is the good stuff. And you mentioned, like, you don't really see that as much, or you'd expect that from an elk community or mule deer community or whitetail community, where RMEF or, you got this big assembly of people that are out there hunting those animals and really passionate about it. And yeah, and I don't know those communities. Like, I've never really, I've been part of fish and game clubs or whatever, but I do feel that the sheep community is just it's a little bit different. I'm not sure why or what it is, but I know the first time I walked into our little show here in British Columbia at the time, Wild Sheep Society, and I'm like, this is home for me. I just walked in and it felt right. I didn't know a single person in that room. I didn't know anyone. I knew a couple guys virtually. That was back, like, when you knew somebody, you didn't know them through Facebook. You knew them through, like, a hunting blog. Like, there was, guys would be on a forum on a post. I think it was Rackmaster, and I was like, I know that guy, and I knew he was going to be at the show, and I knew what he looked like because he'd posted photos, and that was the connection. But I didn't know anyone in that room, and I've never looked back. Like, when I got in there, I'm like, yeah, these are the kind of people. These are my people. I want to be part of this. So. Yeah, it's super cool. Super cool.
Great place.
And then bringing in this exercise component, bringing in the Tough Sheep Challenge and Mountain Tough and these partnerships that the foundation's formed, they just add to that, right? It's super cool. It's so much fun. But
great name for conservation. Really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, the show season's kind of done now, right? When you work in this, you basically kind of break your year into parts. You have show season, then you have spring, summer, preparation. Then you get into fall hunting. Then you recover both with your family and your body after the season is over until it kind of sparks up again in January. So I kind of feel like quarter one of that is over, and now starts the spring, summer, prep, as well as, which includes getting out for bears and a couple of other, kind of preparatory things on that end. But good otherwise. Yeah. Show season is long. It can feel really long, but it's always great, like you said, to connect. And you guys just finished your big banquet. How was that?
Yeah, it was awesome, man. Just great show and great connection. It was interesting. We had some Idaho boys come up. Steve Speck and Mark Usling were up from EXO, and that was super cool to have them come up. And man, they were so well received in BC. Like people were just like flocking to their booth. They just were like, they couldn't believe they had those two guys there and their product there, and so many others too. So it was a lot of fun, and it was great for conservation. We had a very successful event. It's going to pay dividends for the resource for the year ahead. So we're really excited about it. So.
Yeah, I think they had a great time, and I joked with them that I was there. A couple of buddies, they're in Boise with me. So I'm going to jump on the truck next year with you, and you can just tow me up with the packs.
Well, 100%. We'd love to have you up. And what I'm really angling for, I've got a meeting with Adam Yonke here in the next this week, later in the week, and we're planning our Sheep Hunter University for 2027. And I see a spot for you right there for sure, Kyle. So I'm going to be really pushing hard to see if we can get you up here. And I think we're just looking for those professionals like the Steve Specks, the Kyle Kamps of the world that know what they're talking about and really delivering quality material to the passionate sheep hunters that really just want to elevate their A game. So,
thank you. I'd be honored. Be happy to join you.
Awesome. Well, so you're no stranger to the podcast. Some people may have not have listened to the earlier one, and it hasn't been too long, but what we've kind of talked about is kind of doing a quarterly nutrition podcast. I think that's important to people, and we've got really good feedback on having you on the show. So you do a ton of great work on the nutrition angle, and we kind of broke it into 4 quarters. After that last podcast, I'm like, can we do this regularly? And you kind of came up with a concept of a script, and we talked about on this one about planning and about how to have a proper plan for training and strategizing nutrition. So I want to scratch the surface on that today, but maybe just give us the high level 50,000 foot view again of where you're at and what you do in the nutrition world, Kyle, for us.
Yeah. So I work pretty closely with Mountain Tough. We've developed all of their nutrition programming, as well as we have our own nutrition consulting company called Valley to Peak Nutrition. And really the heart for us is twofold. One is to educate people, and then 2 is to prepare them. And that's really just trying to, in both of those angles, give them the tools that they need to be successful for whatever they want to do in the mountains. And for a lot of people, that's like time right now, meaning they're training and getting ready for a trip, as well as then helping guide them through the process on how to plan their nutrition for the trip. So yeah, when we kind of threw this around as an idea, I thought, man, what a great thing to kind of break it into the sections of right now, preparing, training, what does that look like? And then right before you get ready to go, planning last minute, and then of course the trip itself.
Awesome. Well, I know a lot of people talk about getting in shape and sheep shape, and lots of times their plan is focused on the fitness side of things. But as we know, the nutrition is equally and arguably probably even more important. You know, a friend of mine had said something that always resonated with me. Is like, you can't outrun your diet. You just can't outrun your diet. And I thought, wow, that was pretty insightful wisdom. And that, if you, diets is such an important component to success there. So let's maybe talk about starting with the plan. What does that look like? How does it mesh, the fitness plan mesh with the diet plan, nutrition plan? I think I used the word diet, which I don't think you particularly like that word, but nutrition is one thing I heard you say lots last time. But talk about a little bit about how you come up with that plan and what that looks like, and how you move forward.
Yeah. So the very first thing that I think we all have to kind of decide on is what we want leading into a hunt. And so, if you're planning to hunt in August, you've essentially got, we're recording this on March 9th. You've essentially got about 5 months to get ready for that. And what I have found in the years of doing this is that for most people, they're going to fall into one of three categories in terms of what they want prior to this. They either want to lose weight, they want to physically prepare for the hunt, or they want both. So the way that we categorize these is they either want fat loss, because when you say weight loss, people will instantly rebuttal with, well, I don't want to lose muscle, I want to lose body fat. And that's good. I mean, that should be the goal. So they want fat loss, they want performance, or they want both. And when the very first thing that you have to decide on is what corner of that triangle you're going to sit on. Because when you build your nutrition plan, it has to be angled towards that corner, or you're never going to hit it. Like the metaphor that I use for people is, it would be like going to the rifle range to sight in your rifle and just shooting it down, just into nothing. There's nothing you're aiming at. So you really have no clue if your plan or your strategy is hitting what you want without any sort of a central target. Now, what's core to that is your nutrition plan has to be lined up for that. So for example, if you were targeting fat loss, there would have to be, to some degree, a minor calorie deficit present to lose weight. It has to be present to mobilize body fat. If you were targeting building muscle or performance, you would need a certain amount of protein per day to accomplish that, right? And there's no real way to know if you're hitting that if you don't know what your goal is. So the first thing that you've got to do is you have to establish what your actual plan is that you want. What do you want as the outcome for this? When you envision yourself in June and July, what do you picture? And then start to plan your nutrition from there.
So how does that mesh with the training aspect of it? Are these two independent plans? Are you talking to the nutritionist exclusively on the diet side of things, the nutrition side of things, and then completely independent? And I know obviously you guys mesh with Mountain Tough, so there's their programs as well. So, for the purposes of this argument, does it make sense to pick one of those sides, the corners of that triangle? So let's say we're like when you're talking about, I'm like, I want to lose weight and I also want to improve my health, right? So to me, like that's the bifold one. I want both those in my plan. Can we go through that today with that assumption on what that looks like in kind of moving forward?
Yeah. So let's circle back to the different options for training as kind of like a secondary thing. But when you're talking strictly about how to marry your nutrition in with your training plan, here's a thing to remember. For anyone who falls into that category of fat loss and or fat loss with improved performance, you're going to need to, number one, create a calorie deficit. Now, here's a huge, huge thing to keep in mind. You are trying to create just enough deficit to move the weight, not a huge one. Because if you create a big one, you are now compromising the performance end of things. There's not enough fuel to train with. There's not enough protein to recover from. So you're trying to create a very minor deficit to move that weight. If you remind me, we'll come back to how do you calculate that? How do you figure it? The second part of that is you're going to want to get a mix of your three main nutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. The number one thing people want to drop off when they try to lose fat is they want to drop carbs. The problem is, and we kind of talked about this a little bit last time, when you do that, when you drop carbs, now there is no fuel in the system for a lot of the harder training efforts that you're doing. So it's great that you're seeing weight loss, but you can't get through your training sessions, or you can't get through an entire training week as strong as you started on Friday as you did on Monday, in other words, because there's no fuel in the tank. So the composition of that calorie deficit, where those calories are coming from, need to be distributed, need to be considered as they're being distributed. You need to be sure you're getting some carbs for training, some protein for recovery, some fat for health. So how you distribute those begin to matter as well. And in reality, this same premise is true for the person who says, I'm not really interested in losing any weight or body fat. I'm kind of okay with where I'm at there, but I am interested in trying to maximize my performance. You want to begin to dose each of those nutrients, carbs, proteins, and fats, according to the training that you're doing. High intensity training is going to require more carbohydrates. You're going to need a certain amount to recover from that with your protein. If you're not doing a lot of high intensity training, you don't necessarily need to bolster carbohydrates, but you do want to make sure you're getting sufficient calories for the trainings. So you want to kind of have an idea of what your goal is. You want to have an idea of what your calorie needs are based on that goal. And then you want to decide, how do I distribute those calories among my three main nutrients to achieve the goal that I have in mind? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. In a conceptual level, but what I'm interested in is how does it work on the ground? So you tell me, okay, Kyle, you tell me you want to lose fat, you want to gain performance, and first of all, and you talked, well, remind me about calorie count. So where to even start there? So like I'm like, okay, I want to start today. How does that look on the ground in terms of building a plan?
So you're going to want to take your total body weight, and you're going to want to take your body weight times 10 to 13 if your goal is weight loss, right? And that's in pounds. So you'd have to do the conversion in kilos. I don't have a calculator in front of me.
I use pounds too. So
yeah. You would want to multiply that for loss. Now, if you were looking and you were thinking about maintenance, then you're going to be somewhere between 14 and 16 calories per pound. And if you were looking at trying to really put your body in a state of putting on a decent amount of muscle, you'd want to be above that. Or weight gain. Some guys are interested in gaining weight prior to hunts for the purpose of trying to build a stronger chassis. You'd want to be above that 16, 17. Now, you'll notice there's a range there, 10 to 13. Like, that's a fairly large range for a person. And so the important thing to remember, regardless of where you fall in this range, is these are starting points, places for you to begin with, a range that's probably going to trigger some initial progress, but then you're going to have to adjust from there, either up or down, right? So they are designed when we work one-on-one with people, we can get you precise numbers. But it's impossible to get precise numbers on a podcast for such a vast range of people. So we've always used, those numbers as ranges when trying to talk to bigger audiences. So those are going to be your loose targets. Now, with the distribution of those, carbohydrates for energy, proteins for recovery, fat for health, for the most part, depending again on the intensity of your training, we suggest somewhere between 40 and 60% of those coming from carbs. Right? So 60% if it's a lot of volume, if it's a really intense, if you're finding that you're not recovering through the week. Carbohydrates are going to refill those muscle cells and make sure that you have as much energy on day 5 as you did on day 1. Protein is dosed on your weight. Now, protein can be a little bit controversial, but what we find is that 0.7 grams per pound is when the trigger is tripped. Meaning, if you hit that threshold, that puts your body in a state of muscle building. If you want to go above that, you can, but that is where you at least want to hit. That's a minimum. Now, we also can't say that more is always better. So that's something else to remember, is that once you hit that threshold, you can go higher if you want to, but there's this adage of everybody needs a gram per pound. That's not true either. We don't find that necessarily to be true across the board. That body weight that you use there should be off of the weight that you're comfortable at. So like if someone says, hey, I'm 20 pounds over my comfortable weight where I want to be, then use the weight that you are currently at minus 20 pounds. So if you're at 190, you want to be at 170, use 170.
Okay, so you eat too many carbs. So you've got your carbs for energy, and that obviously gets converted to fat, if I'm not mistaken.
It doesn't. It only gets converted to fat if it's in excess in calories, and that's true of all macros. So if I ate too many calories, like if I ate nothing but protein and exceeded my calorie intake in a day, I will put on body fat. It'll be difficult to put on body fat because it's a very low likelihood I can eat that much protein in a day without feeling overly full or too stuffed or hungry or anything else. So all of our nutrients, carbs, proteins, and fats, can be converted into body fat if they are in the face of too many calories.
Okay.
So that's where that distribution comes into play.
So it's not always carbs like that. Like to me, it was in my brain. Like, okay, well, we want to reduce weight. So I was always thinking excess carbs equals fat on the bone. So, start reducing your carbs and that's going to help. But that's the case. And it doesn't matter if you have an excess in any one of those 3 areas, they can all be stored as fat.
100%. Yep. And so you will find that is most people's thinking. And the comment that we get most often is, it was great that I was seeing some losses, but I had no energy to do anything, right? And so you'll slowly start to temper those carbohydrates back up to an appropriate, not an excess, but an appropriate amount, and you find that they are able to train at a much higher level, which not only continues the body fat because they're able to push harder, but now improves performance. And so for years, like the adage has been, well, you can't lose weight and build muscle at the same time. Turns out you can when you dose things appropriately.
Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my next question was adjusting your plan. So you come up with this, we sit down with you, you come up with this amazing plan. You're like, okay, this is my goal. This is what I want to achieve. Here's kind of where you need to start and where to go. So now you start down your path and, so to me, the energy side's pretty cut and dry. Like I have zero energy. Like, okay, well, maybe increase your carb intake, or maybe you're not getting enough calories. But where it gets dicey for me is, okay, well, I've been on the program now for 2 weeks and I haven't seen really any change. Like nothing's happening in terms of maybe you notice it energy wise, but maybe actually your energy's down because now you were like sitting on the couch for a month and did nothing, and now you're actually out doing things. But what you're seeing is like nothing on the scale. So how do you do you just need time for that to adjust? Like where do you go from there?
It's because of one of 3 reasons. Number one, your body is either adapted and you have to change the plan. I have found that to very rarely be the case. Number 2, compliance is off. We'll come back to that one because that includes really a couple different things. Or number 3, you need time. there have been many, many times that when I'm working with someone and reviewing their nutrition, reviewing their progress, reviewing their check-ins, and nothing's moving, if I see they're checking all the boxes and they are compliant, then I just know this is time and it will move. Many, many, many people have prematurely quit on their efforts because they were not seeing something they thought they should be seeing, and in reality, they were right where they needed to be. Many people have done that. Now, this compliance word. Compliance is what we funnel under the word of basically meaning what you think is coming in is not actually coming in. That could either be negligence, that could either be intentional or unintentional. Unintentional in the sense of like negligent, I just didn't have time to really pay attention to my food, but I kind of made some effort. The problem or the trouble with fat loss is kind of made some effort sometimes won't move it. I mean, it may move it in the beginning, but as you get those initial wins, it may not keep moving it. You may have to buckle down, pay a little closer attention for a period of time. So we find that to come in the form of either your portions are off or what you think is coming in is not what's actually coming in. So like a good example of this would be if you think that your square of lasagna was 2x2 and it was really 4x4, well, it wasn't 400 calories, that was 8. And so you were unintentionally off. It's not to say that someone was just like egregiously blowing the system. It's usually not. It's usually there was just something off that they didn't see, that is actually leading to a higher intake than what they thought they were getting.
So I guess there's the mental component of it too, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
there's, it is doing what your plan says and following it, and then, haphazardly following it. It's like going to the gym for your 40-minute workout and you quit after 10 minutes and say, yeah, I went to the gym today, I'm good. I guess, so, you come up with a plan, you start on this path. What are some of the things that a person needs to do to be successful? And I guess, I think lots about like the service that you guys offer, right? The work that you're doing. And there's probably some people that are really like, all of us are more than capable. I'm sure that, with the technology out there, you could probably go out and build some sort of a semblance of a plan, listen to every single one of your podcasts, and you probably have a good idea what you need to do. But that's probably the easy part, right? In so many ways, there's so many factors. And I think where it gets murky for people is the ability to follow a plan or the need to adapt when things aren't going the way you want it to. You're like, and like you said, maybe you were right on track. You just didn't give it the time that you needed, or maybe the adjustment needed to be made at that point in the plan and you never got there. So, kind of your experience as a nutritionist and supporting people, what have you seen as the key factors in being successful once you've built a plan on this, Kyle?
So the first thing is, I think you have to spend some time, if you've never done it, you have to spend some time getting an audit on things. And what I mean by that is, and begin to track your food and begin to track your portions. What does 4 ounces of meat even look like? What is a cup of cereal look like? What's a cup of milk look like? What do portion sizes look like? What is the calorie content of that portion? And then what is that relative to my need? And as you start putting those things in, the comment that we hear the most often is we sort of encourage people to do this. And again, this is not a permanent lifetime, license to track your food. I'm saying get an idea of how things work. But the comment that we hear the most often is, man, I just had no idea. I had to be eating thousands of calories per day and I had no clue until I started really paying attention to it. So I think that is kind of number one. Number two is master the basics and be relentlessly consistent with those. Don't get spun up in fancy, like things that you can't follow, or things like, this is especially true for people with families who feel like they've got to be in the corner eating their special diet food while the rest of the family eats dinner, figure out ways that you can still involve yourself in the normal stuff rather than trying to be married to the idea of a really strict program to drive this. And number 3, like, dangle that carrot of that hunt in front of you. There will be times you don't want to quit, or there will be times that you want to quit. And there will be times that, making the difficult decision is harder. But if you dangle that carrot of what's going to be in front of you and envision yourself reaching that goal, it makes it easier. And every time you make that decision that's hard in the moment, staying the 40 minutes in the workout rather than quitting at 10, choosing a different option for breakfast rather than, the donut at the 7-Eleven, every time you make that decision, it grows from being really difficult to second nature. And that's something we say all the time, is we are trying to move people from focused intentionality into second nature to where you're not even thinking about it. And that's the way habits develop, right? So we use different tools for a period of time so that it eventually becomes a new habit and we don't necessarily need to rely on those tools anymore.
Very cool. You talked about motivation, about the vision of the hunt, and about being successful in the field. How important are the pounds? So let's say a guy that wants to shed a bunch of weight. Is it important to have that number written on the wall and to focus on that, or is that sort of a failed mentality?
What we say is you could do every single thing right and have no control over that number that you see, whether that's how many pounds I want to lose in a given week, or you extrapolate that out over the next 5 months. You can do everything right and have no control over what moves. Now, what we want then is we want to put control over the variables that we have control over. So what we say is control the habits and let the outcomes be what they're going to be. I can control how many days per week I show up to my workout. I can control what I put in my mouth. I can control what my habits are. And it's very likely that the outcomes that I get from those are going to be in alignment with what I want, regardless of how much that weight moves. And I'll say this, it would be better for you to lose 10 pounds and do it strongly than to lose 25 pounds and be weak because you lowered your calories so much to see this number. So there is a difference between lowering your weight and being capable and having a good firm chassis underneath you versus lowering your weight to a number that's low and being weak. And I've seen both. And I will always take the guy or the gal who lowers their weight in a way that allows them to maintain their strength and their performance than the lowest weight possible but be weak because of the approach they took to get there.
Okay.
If that makes sense. We actually did a podcast on this a few years ago called When Light is Too Light, and specifically as it relates to mountain hunting. And it was actually Mark from EXO and me, and both of us talking about our weight loss experience. Mark, I think, lost 80 pounds. I lost 140. And we've been on both sides of that spectrum where, my lowest weight was 15 pounds lighter than it is now. And I had no hope of moving in the mountains at all. So lighter does not always equate to better. You're looking for the point in which those two lines intersect of physical, strong, capable, and a weight that I'm good at versus going so far off the other side of that bell curve into, okay, well, now I'm so light that I'm not capable and can't recover either.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. I'm not there worrying about that stuff just yet, Kyle. So, but hopefully one day. Let's talk a little bit about so you've got your plan, you've got your goal, and you've kind of established a few things. But you talked about, the different, carbs versus fat versus protein. How does that translate now to coming up with a meal plan? So, we've got the conceptual aspect of it, but then somebody needs to, where the rubber meets the road. So what do I put in my mouth now? Like, pretty obvious, some of these things, but other things aren't quite so obvious. So how do you come up with a nutrition plan once you've sort of established what your goal is and you've got your breakdown and you know your macros? One thing I'll just impart, my son, he starts his week, he takes his fitness, both of them take their fitness pretty seriously. So he'll meal prep for the week, and his meal for 5 days is exactly the same thing. He builds like he weighs everything goes in a box, goes in the fridge, and then he goes to work and he takes it with him. And I don't know how he varies his breakfast or his dinner, but I know lunch for the week he has 5. And I'm like, you eat the same thing every day for 5 days, and obviously it's pretty simple in that regard and easier to track. But how does somebody take the plan, the concept of the plan, to where the rubber meets the road and what they're putting in their mouth at the end of the day?
Yeah. So the absolute easiest way to describe this is you want to take those numbers that you came up with and you want to figure out how to distribute them fairly evenly through the day. So you like, let's just for simple math say that a person's targeting 2,000 calories in a given day. I'm going to decide how many times a day I like to eat. Personally, I love to eat, so I'm going to eat maybe 4 times a day. So I'm going to take 2,000, I'm going to divide it by 4 and say, look, what I'm aiming for each time that I eat today is about 500 calories. And the reason that I'm doing that is really for a couple different reasons. Number one, where people run into trouble is they wake up and think the sky is the limit. So they eat this big breakfast, and by 10 a.m., they've burned through 75-80% of their calories, and they're trying to nibble on celery and carrots the rest of the day just to stay below their threshold. Number two, whenever I plan for that even distribution, not only am I not overshooting early, but I am making sure that I've got sufficient for later too, right? So by having that even distribution, I'm providing myself this very even and flat level of energy. Flat meaning good. Good levels all day long. I don't get big peaks. I don't get big valleys. It's very consistent, stable energy for my training and throughout my entire day. And it's easy to track. I don't come to dinner and wonder, well, what do I have left or how much have I spent? And, maybe I'll carry the 1 and tomorrow I'll have less. It's just the same. It's the easiest way to try to formulate that. Now, it is very easy to do like your son did, which is, hey, breakfast, same thing. Lunch, same thing. Dinner, same thing. And that might be true for the folks listening that are single and, just are able to adhere to that. But for other people who have families, what's nice about creating this strategy, having a game plan for the day, is that if you come home from work and your spouse has made dinner, you know what your budget is. I got 500. So regardless of what he or she has made, I can now use, an app or a tracker or whatever, figure out how much of this gets to 500, and now I know my portion size. And that just allows you to really feel like you're able to be a normal human and do this. And that's the goal. Like one thing we say all the time is people underestimate the doability of a program, the value of finding something that you can actually do. And it is inevitable that life is going to happen. You're going to find yourself out later for a work trip than you thought, or you're going to be hungry at a gas station, or you're going to come home and your spouse has cooked something, or it's a birthday or summer barbecue. Who knows? I mean, life is full of great social opportunities with good food. And your ability to know how to work inside of those rather than have your own little plan in the corner where you're eating your Tupperware all the time, kind of unrealistic. And that's a key. Like, we're 5 months out, right, from these hunts. Your ability to be consistent most days over the next 5 months will be contingent on you creating something that you feel like you can do in any given situation. Because any movement, whether it's training, performance, weight loss, fat loss, hinges on consistency. So if you have summer vacations and you have all of these different things, then you can kind of do good for 14 days of the month, but then, 16 days of the month you're kind of off. Well, you're off more than you're on. So you're never going to see anything happen with that. So you have to figure out how you can string together a series of days where you can be consistent, and that is trying to work this inside of your life as opposed to building this separate life that is not really separate because you have other people and obligations to think about.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. So I want to jump into the pitfalls of mistakes people make, but let's just talk on the planning side. So obviously you guys offer that service, right? So if somebody wants help building a plan, you guys, how does it work, like with the service you're doing? And you've been phenomenal, Kyle. Like, we've been on twice now, and you've never once said, you guys got to come and see us and we're going to fix you. You've never ever done that. But I'm curious on that, like, because obviously you can come up with a plan and you can try and do your thing. What does it look like when someone comes to you and says, "Fix me"? What do you do?
Our whole goal, my entire goal, if that happens, is I would rather educate you than fix you or build you something. Because if I fix and build you something, it either, number one, makes you reliant on me forever, which is not the goal, or number two, it means you will fail when you leave because you have no idea how you got there. So we prefer to instead spend our time educating people with what they're already doing. And what that means is, you're keeping an audit of your food every week when you check in with me. I know what your goals are. You tell me the problems from the week. You tell me from the good things of the week. And then we say, all right, let's develop some strategies around these problems so they don't continue to become problems. And when you know how to do that, and you do that enough times and enough iterations of check-ins, you now find yourself in any situation knowing how to handle it. Because it's, nutrition at its core is pretty basic. And so when you start to realize, all right, my success hinges on being below this number, and my success hinges on kind of a mixed composition of these different kinds of foods. And as long as I'm doing that, I get this outcome that I want. You start, through the nature of these conversations, being able to build common denominators and, like, okay, pizza night with the family, I can deal with that. One slice of pizza, I'll go ahead and make a big salad. We'll cut up some protein to put on the salad. So rather than my typical 5 slices, now I've got 1 slices with more protein on the salad. I'm okay. Now I can make my lunches and they can look like a beautiful training program should look, right? And nobody can interrupt those because it's just me for lunch. But if I come home and my kids want, whatever, like, I want to be able to figure out how to navigate that. So we spend our time educating people rather than just building them plans. Now, within that education, we do try to provide examples. Here's what a good week would look like. Here's what you've told me you hate. Here's what you've told me you like. Here's what a sample week could look like. Here's what some substitutions for that rice that you can't stand anymore looks like. Here's some different options for that. So we just found years ago that people had success with us when we were building them plans, but then they'd leave and they wouldn't. And I didn't want that. I mean, I lost 140 pounds and kept it off, and it meant the world. It changed my life. And I wanted people to have that too. And so we said, you know what, rather than spending our time creating templates and emailing them to people, what if we just spend time with people and teach them what we know? And, the motto that we sort of live by is, if I can work myself out of a job over the next however long you're with me, then I've done my job.
That's awesome. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about how often you want to eat a day. So, some people want to eat 2-3 times a day. Some people want to eat way more than that. How critical, so we see all these amazing, novelty diets where you can't eat, I'm going to fast until 4 p.m., like 20-hour fasting or crazy stuff like that. How critical is that morning breakfast, and how critical is, the timing on your meals? What does that look like? It's
not really. In other words, I don't think that there is any sort of an advantage to becoming a breakfast eater if you're not naturally already a breakfast eater. Where that idea does fall apart, however, is if by not eating breakfast, you get to lunch so hungry that you then just wind up eating at some fast food place and blowing through 90% of your budget, then it's a problem. We would have been better to be strategic about something earlier, control the lunch so that you can hit some of these numbers that are important. Now, when you talk about the performance end of things, there used to be this idea that you needed to eat within 60 minutes of your workout to get any benefit from that workout at all. And we called that the nutritive window of opportunity. And we don't find that to be true. We find that the nutritive window tends to be more like a nutritive barn door, because for most people who are working out, they are either they have just finished eating or they'll be eating shortly after, to where there's always nutrients in the bloodstream for their body to pull from. So timing is of less concern. The only time that timing, if you're looking solely at performance and really trying to grow your ability and capability in the mountains, the only time that timing becomes more important is if you stop eating early in the evening. I'll give you some examples so it makes sense. And then you'd prefer to then not eat again until lunch, but you work out early in the mornings. That can be problematic. So, for example, if you set a hard line for yourself that, hey, I'm going to stop eating at 6 p.m. every night, I'm going to work out at 5 a.m., and then I'm not going to eat my first meal until noon. You have, what amounts to, what's the math on that? 12 plus 17 some odd hours with no nutrition in the bloodstream. There is nothing there for the muscle to pull from to grow and restore itself. So we tend to find, not always, but we tend to find for the most part, people do not improve their performance to their potential following that. You'll lose weight because it's probably going to be less calories consumed when you're trying to eat within 5 hours instead of 12 over a day. But again, if you lay out the plan right and you have good distribution, you don't have to worry about that either. It's the best of both worlds. But aside from that one unique scenario, we don't find that there's the magic of timing like we once thought there was.
Okay. Can you touch a little bit about somebody comes up with the plan, so they got a goal, they know where they're going, they've kind of figured out what they need to do in terms of their distribution, they come up with a meal plan. What's some of the bigger mistakes, the common pitfalls that people will find themselves they get into that not let them achieve their goals, or they give up, or whatever the case may be?
There is no question it's consistency. And consistency can look a variety of different ways, but what we see the most often is I do really, really good during the week, and as a reward for doing good in the week, I'm going to give myself off on the weekend, and then I'm going to pick back up on the weekday. And what can happen is that, quote, time off on the weekend can often offset the work you did during the week, depending on the degree to which someone goes over. And you can often see this done by the quote unquote cheat day, right? So you can get by with some of that in the beginning, because when you start anything that's new to the body's going to respond favorably. The question of will that just be the initial response or an ongoing one really depends on the consistency. And, what we see time and time again is a person's ability to be consistent in following that plan, following those numbers, will be the difference between seeing some initial progress and them reaching that goal that they envision for themselves by the time late July comes around and they get ready to go into sheep hunts, into August.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess on the planning perspective, we'll probably touch on this in another podcast, but there's the whole planning your fitness plan up to your hunt, but then there's the hunt itself. And I guess that's kind of a different animal. We probably jump into that on a subsequent podcast, I would imagine. It's not really applicable to the journey to get to your hunt. And then once you get on a hunt, it's a little bit different. Just maybe a little feedback on your thoughts with that.
Yeah. So the way that we've got it laid out here, I think we can cover that in probably 2 ways. We kind of have one slated out for mid-July. I think that would be a great one to kind of help people finalize some of the plans that they're planning to do for the actual hunts themselves. But right now, for 5 months out, my focus would be trying to achieve whatever I am in. I would try to picture what I want to be when August comes. Do I want to be stronger? Do I want to be faster? Do I want to weigh less? Do I want to, whatever I'm envisioning myself in August as, I'm going to begin trying to make strides towards that right now. You do not want to enter early August in some massive deficit. And again, if you write your plan correctly, you shouldn't be in a massive deficit through this anyway. But I'm trying to really picture what I want to be in August and then work backwards and begin to chip away at that right now.
So how do you write that plan? Like, what does that look like? We've talked lots about it. We've touched on all these things, but somebody gets off this podcast and they're like, what the hell do I do now? What the hell did they do? How do you approach it?
They need to go back and rewind to the numbers we talked about, the ranges for calorie intake, the composition on percentages for the differences between carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Get out a calculator, get out a pen, and begin to go to work. Now, one thing we've kind of hinted at but have not really said directly is I would spend some time at some point really tracking this, whether that's in an app or it's in a notebook, tracking in what your targets are for calories, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and then tracking what the actual intake is. Where do those compare? Are you close? Are you too low? Are you too high? And then track your progress. Is this number you came up with producing results that you want? If not, then I would adjust. If they are, then I would continue.
And I think one of the things we talked about in the last time you and I chatted was the scale is going to be reflective of some level of progress. Certainly, you're going to have an idea which direction you're going, and being consistent on that. So not weighing yourself on a Sunday night one time and then Tuesday morning, and then either weigh yourself very regularly, or if you're doing it on a weekly basis and only once, do it on the same day every single time.
Yeah, and if you're training right now, I would find I would encourage you to find other ways to evaluate your progress too, because the scale can be very funny when you're training. A lot of times it'll go up and you're actually losing body fat. So you can do that through pictures. You can do that through how your clothes fit. You can do that through measuring performance improvements through, whatever workout it is that you're doing. You can do that through inch measurements at your waist or your chest or your hips or your thighs or all of those. If sometimes the inches will drop, but the weight will go up, that's good. Don't stop. So don't use the scale as a sole metric to define whether or not you're successful, because sometimes it'll go up, but that does not mean what you're doing is wrong. So if you find these different angles to view progress through, you can then step back and say, okay, the inches have gone down, my weight hasn't moved, I have gotten faster and stronger in the last 30 days, I've tracked my nutrition. That is not a reason to change your plan. That is a reason to keep going. If you're seeing all that, do not let that weight be the sole indicator of your success. You need to evaluate it through multiple lenses, because it can be very funny. It can be very funny and jump kind of all over the place. And that's the other thing is if I would not change anything in my plan based off of one weight. If I get on the scale and it shoots up, I'm not changing it. I need to see no change over, several days or a trend line over several days before I'm changing anything. I'm not going to see some positive change and then see it go up one day and think that one time going up is reflective of a bad meal. It's not. It takes many bad choices and many good choices before things start moving.
Okay. We touched a little bit on the psychological aspect. We talked about a vision or a goal, like seeing yourself being mountain ready in August, or being successful on that hunt. What are some of the other sort of psychological aspects? What do you see in successful people versus unsuccessful people in terms of, I guess, maybe some of the things that they're doing, but more so the psychological aspect? How do they self-motivate?
That is a good question. I think one thing that we see often is when people are more locked in on the habits and the things that they control versus the outcomes themselves, they are more likely to be consistent and then more likely to see better outcomes. The other thing is, I would say that we see across the board is people who are not driven by motivation. They are driven by, this is what I am going to do, right? Regardless of what the outcome is, regardless of how much time I do or don't have, they are just very focused on the execution, regardless of every reason in the book to not execute. They see success, of course, right? And I mean, it's very much the heart of a sheep hunter. You're going to be in a tent. You're going to be rained out. You're going to be fogged in. You're going to be tired. But being out there as long as humanly possible sometimes is the success. It's like you have to be there to be successful, and being able to endure some of that. To be honest with you, you talk about being 5 months out. There are innumerable podcasts about mental discipline and go sit in an ice bath and if you want mental discipline, take the next 5 months, and every time you don't feel like going to work out, you go, that's going to forge mental discipline. You take the next 5 months, and every time you turn down that thing that looks so delicious in favor of something that pushes you harder in training, that's going to develop mental discipline. Every time you're telling yourself no to something you want because what you want most is more important to you than that forges mental discipline. And when we see people have those, and in my mind, I don't tell them this, but in my brain goes to, it is not if you see the end of this, it's just when. It's time. You'll see it. If you have that, it's just when. It's a matter of time. It is not a matter of if it happens. But when you see people kind of wax and wane based on their motivation and all the potential things in life that could come up and, make an excuse for why they didn't do it, and it's tough. It's tough. But if you find a way to make it happen, it'll happen.
That's awesome. Very inspirational for sure. And love that approach to it. Okay. Is there anything else on the planning side that we haven't hit on, Kyle, that we're missing here that we need to touch on?
No, I think, briefly on training, I would say this, because I think people fall prey to this a lot, is you have 5 months from now. And the idea is, for a lot of people, this is changing some, but the idea is just to completely badger yourself over the next 5 months. And that is not what you want to do. You really want to view this as a slow progression that builds over time, right? And you need to look at the nutrition and the training hand in hand. The nutrition is designed to allow you to execute your training program and to recover from it. And if you're doing that in a successive way, your training program, if built well, will improve your performance. But the performance doesn't increase, and you don't recover from that training without nutrition. And so you need both hand in hand. As you start to build into these 5 months, get a good training program, progressively build it over time. Don't wear yourself out too soon. You got 5 months. Part of that is part of staying strong over 5 months and injury free is really tempering that up, not going 125 miles an hour thinking more is better. Smarter is better, but more is not.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Ton to think about there. Anyone that's interested in getting support from you guys, you personally, what does that look like? How do they get involved? What do they need to do?
Yeah, so if you are a subscriber to Mountain Tough and you've not, I would encourage you to watch our nutrition modules that are in there. There's already a ton of good information. There's some podcasts that we've done on this as well. That's a part of your subscription, so go look at those. If not, and you're interested in working with us one-on-one, you can look us up at Valley to Peak Nutrition. Even in that, we have tons of podcasts you can check out, tons of educational resources. And then, of course, there's an application on our website if you're interested in working one-on-one with us too.
That's awesome. Well, Kyle, Valley to Peak Nutrition, thank you so much. Always learn a ton from you. And obviously there's the inspirational aspect, which we didn't touch on, but you talked about it. A guy that went out and lost 140 pounds, self-motivated, and has made nutrition, the circle and center of his life. So hats off to you and the messaging and the important, great work you're doing for people in our space. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me. I look forward to doing more of these throughout preparation season and into sheep season.
Yeah, we'll touch base in 3 months. What's our next one? What do we have on our list? I didn't get a peek at it, but
so the next one for quarter 2 is more of the preparation and how to adjust nutrition as training gets harder, and then giving thought to what you may want to actually take on your hunt. So I think on that one, so we talked about doing it sometime in late May or early June. If people are starting a training program, that training program is going to build to be much more difficult. How do you adjust your nutrition based on what we just talked about when that happens? As well as if you're into late June, early July, starting to think about what am I going to take on my hunt based on what style of hunt it's going to be. Is it a 10-day backpack hunt? Because that's going to look a lot different than a base camp where you're glassing for sheep and making little day runs.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to it. Look forward to these quarterly check-ins, and it gives me something to work on too. So appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate you too, Kyle.